Just checking. Ansi, can you just check through your mobile if we are going live? Can you check?
We are. Yeah. From here, it looks like we are. Yeah. 1 second. 1 second.
Okay, so good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the first episode of BBX India Weekly Show. Today we have the one and only Reeps one with us, and it is our pleasure to have him. And without any further ado, Reeps, Harry F, how are you? How have you been?
I'm very good, thank you. Happy to be here. As I said just a minute ago, the Indian community is so important. It's growing. Posted. It seems like there's a lot of yeah. Ideas.
Yeah, sweet. Thank you for being here. Raka, you want to take the first question?
What is think about beatboxing, and why beatboxing than any other vocal art forms that we come across? Do you think beatboxing is, or does just like any other vocal art form, or do you think beatboxing has an higher end, slight higher end when it comes to?
So I think we have to be careful. We have to be careful. I think sometimes when you want something to grow, there needs to be caution for how you phrase things being better. Encompasses every single possible vocal technique into one, and most performance mediums. Vocal, most sometimes call it extended techniques. There's been all these other terms for. If you take all of the sort of, you have is probably the most broad spectrum of sound making that's ever happened in any culture. But again and again, when you actually sit them down and you start showing them what's happening in the new school beatbox community, their opinion changes very quickly. Common reaction, strange, because we know as a culture, we call it a culture, as a beatbox culture, we are expanding massively. The amount of the art form is expanding. But actually there is a huge amount of the world that is unaware of that progression and its purpose. So when you ask me that question, not only how many sounds are being made, also thinking about how this art form is a performance, has a unique performance dynamic to it. I was performing in London, and I was a group of soloists. So everyone has an instrument. That's their sort of and master output. When I was beatboxing and showing, many of them what I was doing, many of them was listening. And one of them who played the harp. She said, what's interesting about what you're doing is the voice is so close. It's like when other people play instruments, they kind of have to channel their intentions slightly further. So beatboxing is a strange sort of middle ground between what we're thinking and the outside world. It's so immediate. So you have this huge explosion and all the possibilities. Human voice in a brand new way. way like it never has been used in a brand new way like it never has been used before. The fact that it's so close to the mind, the fact that it's so close to the mind together, I think why maybe all of those things together you can say maybe that there's something unique, there's something special happening. And the last thing I will say, I know I'm talking a lot, but if you're a beatboxer out there and you find a sound that you think no one has done before, there is a chance that you're the first human being that has ever existed to make this sound with the human body. So that enough is a very special and important thing that you think would be covered. But the voice is not fully uncovered, and beatboxers are doing that, and that's why it's special.
Lovely.
Lovely.
I think there's no other better way to put it, like how you said. It's because I think
One second, Raka, I can
yeah.
cut you off. We're getting a lot of people on the stream saying there's a lot of echo.
Okay.
Echo especially. Can you just check? Can you?
Thanks for
Yeah,
everyone
sorry.
joining in, and we're gonna fix that quickly.
Yeah.
Okay. Check.
Whenever you're live streaming, like we can find other solutions as well. But the main thing is that we're here and we're trying to if it is absolute chaos, we can pre-record as well. But let's try. It's good. We're here.
Yeah.
So
We are here.
Let's try it. That's awesome.
So
Sweet. Have you been beatboxing more in lockdown, like being cooped up at home, or has it been a break from things?
Yeah, a bit of both really, because I've always said you can never escape. It's always with you. So because it's always there, like because my whole year disappeared, I was supposed to be traveling everywhere. I had many projects, like everyone. Everyone had the same problem. So when the world took away everything else, I could still practice and beatbox. And I actually had a. It's such a shame because for GBB I was gonna reveal something very new. I had a maybe for the last few years, like my contributions have been other things, but I was training very hard up until like this year's GBB, like everyone again. Because I was gonna come with probably the best showcase that I've ever done, and. Yeah. So when that got taken away, I still had energy to kind of get out. So I was practicing also things like forms of looping and vocalier as well, which is really cool. But yeah, my levels definitely like improved massively over COVID, which is strange. And the ideas are expanding. And I've been recording a lot of new videos. Very sort of unexpected. Been a very sort of unexpected return to Reeps in many ways. But beatboxing more than ever.
Wait to hear.
Sorry, Raka, we're still getting a lot of echo in the chat. Yeah. So maybe just keep it at the monitor one.
Yeah.
We'll just have to see how this goes. So sorry about this.
Comment that that they can still hear. They can. And let's just carry it forward.
Sure.
I have a question. Have you collaborated with an Indian artist before? Like any musician or any Indian artist? Have you collaborated with them?
Yeah, I had a really interesting experience last year. I met a musician called Oliver Rajmani, he basically incorporated because I didn't realize that a lot of folk flamenco Spanish influence rhythms. The lineage also comes from some traditional Indian rhythm and play. So it was an incredible virtuoso. And the idea and the sort of foundations of rhythm and complex control, I think the world bows down to the birthplace of some of the most complex, vast performance capacity to ever exist. And he was really inspiring because his music was such a fusion of different cultures, but the root was from India. And I think when you have that root in like tabla or Indian drum, or is it tal as well, the traditional speaking? Yeah. If you have this as a foundation, you're always like the most powerful sort of music makers and understanding of music and writers come from there. And I've always like known that. But when I was like listening to him perform and we were jamming as well, it was mind expanding, like for me. Obviously in Western culture, we're so addicted to 4/4, and and a lot of music culture is sadly kind of made for entertainment in its purest sense. But going back to roots like that at any point in your musical journey, I just think is always gonna give you more meaning to why you're making sounds. And as a beatboxer, again, the voice, like, this is another idea that in traditional, when you're learning like the hand drum in traditional schools, you don't necessarily have to play the drum. It's the voice. You can internalize the ideas through the voice. So all of those ideas, I think, massively connect to beatboxing and making sure that you expand. So there being a contribution, like this is the dream. I want all of the areas and the different cultures on earth to kind of contribute musically. And I think we are seeing that more and more. Obviously, at the moment, there's a dance aesthetic, but that's what I think is really, really powerful. But I was also today, I'd love for you to tell me what are maybe 3 sort of Indian new school beatboxers that I should like check out, and maybe like why they're special. I know you're supposed to be interviewing me, but I would love for you to kind of like, tell me.
So we have we have first, I think I'll start with a beatboxer called Konakol Beatboxer. Okay, so where he comes from a very classical background where he has been playing tabla, and he can do konakol, and so he's converting those into beatbox patterns, and he's very, very fast, and he's very quick. And so we see this evolution of people. I mean, they're realizing, all the beatboxers, they're realizing, okay, this is my source, this is where I come from, and I need to and that's the beautiful transformation that we are seeing in the community. And we would like to see more of it, and I'm sure that so this Konakol beatboxer, he's creating a trend. And also we have many other beatboxers. Anup, his name is Wadafu. He is an Indian beatbox champion, and he is bringing in his own style. And there is Dilip, Dilip, who is finding his own style. So I'm after this show, we are
Yeah,
going to be sending
yeah.
you a list of checking out. And yeah,
Yeah, just
so
a whole playlist. Yeah, yeah.
I just want to
I,
say interesting that point you make about beatboxing from your environment. Like, I think that's definitely one way that people level up as a
yeah,
musician, because like for me, I was surrounded by early dubstep and grime and electronic music, and like that, it wasn't just what I heard on, like, this was before YouTube, like Christ, but it's not what I was hearing sort of through the radio. It's what was literally coming out of the buildings around me when I was walking around. I'd walk around the corner where I live, and there'd be a group of people all MCing, and it would be a case of like that was my environment. So I was not just beatboxing what I was hearing through like CDs or things far away from me. I was kind of like interpreting and absorbing the energies from around me. And I think when you do that as a beatboxer, it's much more natural. There's something different that happens when you start to really internalize your culture through
yeah,
beatboxing, which is not something people think about. They tend to think, okay, I want to learn this sound and I want to beat this person in a battle. But I think it's a very important goal to think about your environment, because when you start channeling the world around you, I think that's when the world starts to listen to you. It's very strange. This is what beatboxers, either they channel anger, they channel hope, they sort of heal themselves through sadness, or plus wanting to do like amazing beats and make people dance. That seems to be when special things happen. So Indian culture and the surrounding ideas channeled through beatbox is such a special thing.
yeah. So, so spinning off of that point, I have a slightly weird weirder question, which is that we all have different musical influences coming, but grow up speaking different languages. So there's a couple of sound patterns or vowels or consonants. Like everyone's mouth ends up shaped a little differently, uh, in a sense. Have you seen something like that affect people's beatboxing much? Or I was wondering if you had any thoughts there on your first language influencing.
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone's ever like been able to kind of clearly define it, but there definitely seems to be some correlation between genetics and like 'cause genetics defines the shape and construct of you as a person, and there tends to be similar genetics in a region or a place or a nation. Case obviously, everyone is a beautiful mix of things, but when you have consistent genetics, there can be certain sounds that certain people can do that others can't. Like the example I always give is say like Dani's inward K snare. It just his snare sounds very different, and he said before that he's found that people that maybe have similar genetics to him have a sort of a more likely ability to get that tone. Like I can try and do an inward K like him. I've always been terrible at inward Ks. I don't know why, but there seems to be, it's just a logical idea that your genetics can define the instrument and the instrument defines the sounds. The way that you speak, like for example, I know that in I think it's Mandarin, there's so in China there's a much larger portion of people that are pitch perfect. So there's a huge, so there's a higher, you can Google that. So there's a a much higher percentage, and there are ideas that this can be to contribute to sort of tonal languages. So where languages have like tone can change context and meaning, that can lead to a identity in sound. So that can contribute to a better awareness and this idea that people are pitch perfect. So there's like a soup of ideas that indicate that the language you speak can affect your sort of musical understanding, but it's an absolute fact that the language you speak defines how you think. They're like the building for how you think and how you interpret the world. So a really interesting one is to think about the first time that you can dream beatboxing, because I couldn't beatbox in my dreams for years after I started. I had many dreams about being at a gig and I have to perform, and I'd go to beatbox and it'd be very slow. I don't know if you ever tried to run in a dream as well. Sometimes when you try to run, it's like it doesn't quite work. So the same is for a language. When you speak a second language, it shows that you have internalized it. It's become a part of your psyche. So there is this really strange connection between the language that we speak and the systems that sort of we control with our voices, and like everything in between. So all of that shows that language totally affects how we think. It must and absolutely will affect like how we beatbox. But it's so interesting how when you start thinking about sort of what other things does this affect, and what are the benefits of beatboxing. I think beatboxing affects the consciousness in some way. I see it much like meditation. Like when I'm on stage for an hour as an ADD person, it's the only time that I think of nothing else. I'm just in that performance, in that headspace. So focusing on that as well, like the language, mind, and body sort of connection is all one thing, and beatboxing sits in the middle of all of it.
Wonderful. When you were saying this, I was just thinking, and I just want to say this that for everyone who's watching outside India, that we have right? We have 22 official languages, and there are more 100 languages that people are speaking. And when we try, I think the Indian community should focus on finding their own patterns and focusing on their source and their own rhythms. I think it's gonna get crazy. And also one more thing, I just want to tell you that in Indians, if you notice, when we say but, there's always like the sound is there. I don't know if people notice, but every Indian, when they say but, yeah, like this is already there. And there are so many sounds that people don't realize that we are already doing it, but it's a start. So
Yeah, like
it's wonderful, and language and beatboxing is something that I think beatboxing is a language, right? In a way that we all are communicating with each other in a way, and I think I realized it when I came to the camp, when there is a Korean, when there's a Chinese, and we don't speak English, but then we are communicating for hours, and I think that was a beautiful thing which I felt personally.
Well, yeah, I think there's a quote which is laughter is the closest space between two people. So what this means is like when you that vocal expression, if you're with someone or a friend and you both find something funny, just laughing together is such a powerful connection. And there's no, and someone says, so what does the laughter mean? Well, it's like, oh, well, it's funny, but there's not necessarily a specific meaning. Just like when you listen to music, sometimes you listen to a beautiful piece of music or an amazing drop, and you don't necessarily have to say, okay, it means exactly this. It's a feeling. So this idea of laughter is the closest space between two people. I've had moments where I think beatboxing can be that as well, when you're both sharing this vocal expression. And like my favorite moment, I think, wait, who was it? So mine and Alem's friendship is quite funny because we were friends before we could speak to each other, which is maybe similar with other beatboxers. So when Alem first started like coming onto the scene, like we were hanging out, and so many times I tried to speak to him and I'd be like, okay, well there's this and that, and he's like, I don't know. And then he tried to speak to me and I'd be like, sorry, I don't understand. But so we hear this story again and again. But what's interesting is as time passed, he learned to speak English. So typical English person, not speaking French, but I apologize. But it was so interesting because when his personality started to come through, he was exactly who I knew him to be. Like when he started to use even though we were speaking in sort of a traditional sense, through beatboxing, I understood him as a person and the way that he thinks. So there is something very special going on there, and it's a meta language. It's between language. It's above and below language. So that space is very, very powerful. And yeah, this idea that we can break down borders with beatboxing, or if there's a like music in general, man, is just such an important tool for making sure people can overcome conflict. The amount of times I've been different places around the world, and maybe because of where I'm from or the situation, there's some kind of barrier or like tension. But then as soon as you're like, that all disappears. There's a magic to performance, and especially beatbox. That makes people open up and want to share. And if you're jamming with any culture from any place, those walls can disappear very quickly. So it's so important we remember that.
Great.
hmm
What do you think about?
So a couple of
Oh,
minutes
sorry, sorry.
back,
Go on, Mansi.
go
Go
ahead,
on.
Raka. Okay, so a couple of minutes back, you said a few beatboxers, channel their hope, and some channel their anger, and some channel their sadness, but we're not necessarily thinking about like conscious thought when we're on stage. So sort of devil's advocate, like what are you trying to channel in your music? Like before the composition happens, where are you, and then how does that proceed?
Yeah. So I don't know, man. It depends how deep you want to go with this, because from the very beginning, pretty much every single performance I've ever done hasn't been totally planned. Like not one, not a single time. And I have structure, I have like skill and belief and practice. The main thing is discipline, because I always beatboxing. Like, and especially when I was like touring and performing so much, because I was doing it every time, so every day in different ways in different places, it made it easier for me to just go. I have a good beginning, and from there I would just go with the energy. But at first, it definitely was a way for me to channel frustration, the sense of not being heard. Just like where I grew up, it was quite a chaotic environment. I love my family, and and I love my parents, but I didn't necessarily have like a lot of support when I was growing up, which isn't their fault. It's like they didn't have much money and like working class family. So there was things I wanted to do, and there was like differences with the other kids at school sometimes where like you feel that separation. But then when I started to kind of, I was always interested in this idea is, can I ever do anything that's mine, have ownership over something? And yeah, at first it was kind of just something to like learn how to kind of learn some instrumentation better. I was playing some other instruments and I was practicing a bit. But then when I couldn't sort of bring the instruments home, or when I had limitations, or I kind of wanted to get away for some stress, I started to practice with my voice, and I immediately felt a kind of like a break from the world. It just, when I started doing it, I felt a calm. There was like, okay, I'm here, this is mine. No one knows what this is, how it's happening, like how I do it. I don't know how I'm doing it. It's just something that I'm doing, and I'm going to channel this, like this feeling through. And what I thought was going to be a day became a week, and then it became a year, and it became something that totally changed my life. And it started with finding something that allowed me to kind of feel separate from the world just a little bit when I needed it, when I wanted to take a step back from everything. And that is a huge, huge, huge feeling. And even though it's changed, like that sort of the feelings or what I want to get out. Because when I've had the best moments in my life, I want to beatbox. When I have the hardest moments in my life, I wanted to go and do a show, and I get it out. So that's like the kind of deep answer. But the more simple way of seeing it, for my music specifically, there's always been a sense of like power and like release. And many of my friends have said when I go on stage, my eyes change. I like switch. I become like a different energy. So there's some part of me which I think is total, like the Reeps part of me is totally like me, but I don't have full control over it. It's like this wild energy. And my music taste has changed a lot. I've fallen in love with like elegance and beauty and kind of sort of maybe calm power. That's why these days I really love a lot of sort of techno and experimental music. But I always love music that just makes people want to move and like jump and just get energy out. So trying to design the most extreme and powerful drops will always be a big part of me. Not because I love dubstep or dance music specifically. It's the feeling that music conjures up. It lets you burn and release like energy. So yeah, that was a deep answer, and I kind of just more of the making people dance. But it's very important to remember that you can use this to channel and release. I think that's yeah, the most powerful part of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what you've been talking about for a long time is the power of a person, an artist should be having. And what would you want to tell to the upcoming artists in a way that or the beatboxers who are who want to, who was still trying to get a better understanding of themselves. What would you uh, how can a beatboxer expand themselves, like just from the community, from the battling, yeah, that is there, but how more can they expand and find really what they want for all those people who are struggling.
Yeah, probably the biggest really, because I think I've received thousands and thousands of messages from people saying I'm stuck, like I don't feel creative. How do I stay creative? How do I keep expanding? So very quickly, I give some key ideas. The first we've already spoken about, and is to look at your surroundings. It can be the rhythm of a train. It can be maybe the wind blowing. It could be trees. It could be your friends like clapping their hands. You never know where inspiration is going to come from. And you don't want to be taking inspiration from the same place as everyone else. If you're just watching beatbox and beatbox battles, you are going to sound like everyone else. And I'm not saying that there's anything from one pool. There's a saying which is common knowledge is no knowledge. It cancels out. So, of course,
Yeah.
you want to understand what's happening in the scene, but there is Oh my God, there's so much inspiration like in other places and around you. And beatboxers are kind of famous for only listening to beatboxing. I don't know why. And it's not just beatboxers. I know some professional musicians and some professional beatboxers who I'm not going to name any names, but they when they play their instrument, they're like classically trained and they're incredible. But when they start beatboxing, they just beatbox, and these two things don't come together. So you take that into account. The second thing I would say is have many idols. So when I say have many idols, what that means is deeply find sort of people and artists whose work you deeply connect to and respect. And the more, the better. That doesn't mean that you have to idolize them. It doesn't mean that you have to kind of put them on a hierarchy. This is the best and the second. It's just that if you have many people that you really you do the searching and you have an open mind and you go, wow, I love the way this person makes videos. I love the light that like the way light in their films. I love this musician who scores like films. I love this sculptor. What you can start doing when you start building 10 musicians, 10 visual artists, 10 directors, like, you start to kind of find the common thread amongst all of them. So what I'd say to everyone is that if you're feeling stuck and you're like, oh, like I don't know how to go forward, get your head out of your own stuff and go out and find anything. It can be anything that you think that you really respect and you really enjoy, and then think about what it is that's attracting you. So when you do that, you have a much stronger foundation, and when you get stuck or when you get bored, you have somewhere else to go. The final thing is have a break. Make sure that you don't all bang it all the time, because people think that sometimes stopping is bad. So you can have a break by stopping, or you can have doing something else. Like for me, that's always been that's the triangle. So not Illuminati, before anyone says.
Yeah.
The triangle is 3 things that you do. So yeah, that's those are 3 things to think about.
Great. Thanks for that. Sure, because people have been looking up to you when it comes to being creative, and how, and especially on going for a long, what to say, like exploring on this art form, like how long can we go, how can we take this art form forward. And you've been an idol. I mean, you've been a big, like, I'm just going to take a minute, I'm just going to say it, like, for me personally, right? I've You're my biggest inspiration. In the year 2013-14, I remember a time where I'm traveling in a bus, I'm not listening to any song, I'm just listening to your beatboxing. There have been times, and so it's wonderful,
That's
and I
still
would
crazy
say.
for me. Sorry to interrupt you, but I love, and I have take so much sort of energy and respect for your honesty of sharing those things, and the idea of me making something and then somewhere like in another spontaneous, it means so much to me. So it never ever gets less like sort of special. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to again give you that love back. I know that we've shared before, but
Thank you. Mansi, you want to go for the next question?
Mhm. Yeah, so is that what you would define as like the end goal for you as an artist, to have people around the world vibing? Because some artists would be like, I want X money or X level of stage, or everyone sets their goals differently. So as an artist, what sort of goals do you have?
so it's simple, really. My goal has become, I want to do things that have never happened before. Like,
Uh-huh.
so that's it. I'm very lucky to have made a career and a platform, because I think many of my fans, like if we're thinking about just beatboxing, is confusing because I was like part of a certain generation, and then kind of battled. Like obviously, never really. There was the world champs and 2 world champs and the UK champs, and never kind of like left battling too early. Like Paponi was like, no, you can't not battle. It's like you have to do more, otherwise it doesn't work. And I'm like, no, it's cool. I'm kind of I'm going to make a statement. And the reason that I kind of stepped away from battling is because I was already a part of music culture outside of beatboxing, and I was traveling to festivals. Like we did up to 5 festivals in one weekend, like when I was like touring. And that energy, you can't sort of manifest that. This is how I felt, is I couldn't manifest those shows and those performances like whilst I was thinking about battling, because battling would take up all of my headspace. Like 3 months before, I'm thinking about my routine and that energy, and I'm like, how am I going to do this? And my heart's like, I'm imagining like being in front of someone, and it didn't come naturally to me. But whenever I was doing an hour show solo, which like is very rare these days, which I encourage everyone to kind of think about more, is doing these longer showcases. When I was doing that, I felt like, okay, there's something else here. And when I sort of took a step away, I did all of these shows, and then the same thing happened again, where I'm like, okay, I feel like I've established this. Are there other opportunities? And then I started thinking about, okay, why is beatboxing performance? What kind of art can I make? What are sort of other opportunities? And basically like research and exploring and understanding and helping the rest of the world like update their thinking about beatboxing. This kind of felt like my responsibility. And that doesn't necessarily involve social media. It doesn't involve like kind of the expected things. But it became like every single week I was meeting like in a nuclear bunker in Sweden, like where there used to be like a nuclear generator. Just like all these random, I sent my beatboxing to the moon and back. I bounced my beatboxing off of the moon. And it's like, there's this whole list of things that have come just from me in the exploration of finding world firsts and trying to use beatboxing in a new way so that people can kind of think about it. And beatboxing can end up in places that no one ever thought possible. So that goal has given me a whole other sort of connection between art, body, sort of music, performance, thinking, and it's made people that would never consider beatboxing as like a viable sort of thing. Like you would not believe the rooms I've been in, and how did we not know about this? We should think about the voice more, understand the voice more. So that transition, that became my goal for a long time. And then up until about 1.5 years ago, I was like, okay, I want to get back on stage. I want to perform again, in more of a traditional sense. I want to get back to YouTube. And yeah, that's become, it's going with the heart in that sense. So, so finding world firsts and pushing the envelope in that way, I've loved every second of it. And it's allowed me to kind of, just be an ambassador and push it. So, so yeah, that's another long-winded answer explaining some of my goals.
That's awesome. Thank you. So I think we have time.
Yeah.
What I would like to ask is, like, let's say I'm an amazing beatboxer, right? I've won like my sorry. So I'm like a really good beatboxer, and I want to make it as a pro, but I'm spending all my time just watching Swiss beatbox videos, rehearsing in my bathroom. No social media, not very outgoing. I'm being a devil's advocate on purpose. So, not very outgoing, bad at talking to people, have no discipline, things like that. But I'm, like beatboxing isn't what I have to learn. What are the other things that I have to learn in order to go from like just a good beatboxer to a working artist?
Yeah, because that'll be quickly a question back at you. How do you define a pro?
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I said working artist. Like, this of like getting bookings or putting yourself out there or getting that buzz, things like that.
I think the question
Yeah,
is,
I guess it's simple.
I think the question is, what is the balance between having a talent and then your marketing? Talent and marketing. What is the right balance?
Yeah. So definitely having goals is important. Like, I guess the way that it happened for me, and this is the traditional route, is that like if you make making content being involved in a culture. It's not just about you. You want to have a culture around you. You can't do it. You can't sort of expect to do it just as a single individual who never shares, never goes out. Like, you have to give out into the world for it to give back. And my motto is that whatever you give out, you get 1/10 back. So if you want to get a good amount back, you have to be giving out at least 10 times more than you probably expect. And that effort can be put into obviously content, obviously battles. But for me, it's really thinking about what is your show. Think about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour. You want to eventually try and fill all of those slots, because the story that I always tell is there's a record label called Hospital Records, which is quite a famous record label for drum and bass. And when I was just doing 10, 15-minute showcases, Hospital Records saw me performing at Glastonbury, a short showcase, and they said, okay, we want to give you a slot. So I was like, okay, I'll come and do 5 minutes. They're like, no, if you perform it, you have to do at least 30 minutes. Otherwise, like, it doesn't make sense. So I was like, okay, all right, I'll do it. And because before that day, I used to sometimes on a poster or a flyer, you'd see the beatboxer gets put to the side to become like a sort of an addition. But because I agreed to a full slot, the same as some of the other DJs, I was on the lineup. So you have to really think about, even from the very beginning, if you sort of coming out, make sure that you are making some kind of plan when it comes to your content, what you're sharing. It can be honest. Just make sure that it's what you believe in from the beginning. Don't think about numbers, like don't think about views. Start with the content being what you think is a good expression of yourself. And then when it starts to become about wanting to get gigs or maybe make money, really think and consider your performance, your show. So with your amazing skills, you can add narrative, you can add meaning, and you have to think about what that is. As a beatboxer, when I started to move more in my performances, immediately it becomes more than beatbox. People connect with it more. If you stand still and you don't move, people don't connect with you. They don't connect with your humanity, like your connection. So you have to make sure that you're finding a way, you're understanding, aiming for a sort of a longer performance, a traditional format, wherever it is around you, again, you want to have. So if that's battle, by all means, train for and go for that. And that's what most people do. But look at other sort of events, other opportunities, other spaces, and think about, how could I be happy doing a performance there? Can I do a 30-minute performance there where it has some collaboration, it has some looping, and it has my voice? Like, think about the fact that you are an instrument, you are like the ways of updating that skill so it just fits with some of the templates that are already out there. Because if you go on with just the mic, with no preparation, no production, no understanding of your show or your performance or your meaning, then you'll just get pushed to the side, and beatboxers don't deserve that. They should be bang in the middle, at the front, doing their showcase.
Right. I think that's the last few lines that you said. Beatboxers should be on the front line. I think that's the bigger goal, and we all should work towards that. I think I'm sure like because we have a lot of kids watching, okay, and these kids are all aged from 12 to 16, and what you just said, I think that will should hit them, and they should try to come in the front line.
What I will just say as well, just one more thing, is when you beatbox, you're using your voice, but make sure you have whilst you beatbox. Don't hide behind your beatboxing. Make sure that your personality and your soul and your energy is equal to your beatboxing. And that's the most important thing. If you're hiding behind it and your sort of spirit is down here and everyone can hear your beats, you can be the best beatboxer in the world, but they don't always want to listen to your beatboxing. They want to know who you are as well. My hands are disappearing. So yeah, you want to make sure that those two things are equal, because you'd be so surprised when you honestly share like that. People hear.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. Finally, just as a closing answer, like you can keep it short if you want. What do you think, or where do you think the beatbox community is headed? And in the year 2030, how do you see the beatbox community?
So I think voice. So I think that there will be a breed of beatboxing, which is just a hyper version of what we see now, which is takes the esports model. Because something we didn't talk about is over the pandemic, um, games like chess, like online chess, has exploded. Like before the Netflix Queen's Gambit series, which is very popular now,
Yeah.
chess players are now part of the esports community. So there is beatboxing kind of has the same ability where if you look at the GBV lineup, they're all kind of like characters that I really is the energy associated with esports. So I think that there is definitely a possibility for a huge top level kind of esports style community and event where beatboxers are they're able to battle and collaborate on a way. Like on chess.com, there's 100 this for beatboxing, and also these events will be absolutely has the potential to be absolutely huge. And with things like skating and breakdancing being in the Olympics, there is some conversations to try and set this up that
Yeah.
which which right now seems crazy, but the way that it's expanding, anything is possible. And there's a few secrets as well, which I can't share right now, but there's a few things happening which might push it in this direction. But we need to help each other. We can't have sort of people trying to win over one another. The community needs to come together, otherwise people won't open those doors. So it's more important than ever to collaborate.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Reeps. Thanks for joining us today, and it was wonderful talking to you. And I'm sure, like we have
Yeah, an
put out,
honor. Thank you.
yeah, it we because this is very new for our community, right? I mean, we never we battle, we have online jamming, we do all this, but this I think this is the first time we are trying to discuss on topics and then having you, and we just started this with you, and we have been. Thank you for it's our pleasure to have you, and it was a wonderful show that we have, wonderful kickstart that we have had with you.
Well, yeah, if one next, then this is a win. So, yeah, and hopefully I can come to India at some point soon.
We will
Yeah, we'd
make that.
love to have you here.
Yeah, we'll make that happen for sure.
Okay, well, yeah.
Woo!
Ash, Ash in the chat, guys.
Yes, yes.
Thank you everyone for joining in. This is BBX India Weekly Show, the first episode. We had Reeps one, and it was wonderful. Once again, see you all in the second episode. Until then, this is Rakavi signing off. Manasi on the other end. Yeah, so thank you all. Put an end to this